Good afternoon, everybody, and I hope you're having a fantastic week and a fantastic Wednesday. My name's Scott Harrison, Cybersecurity Solutions Team Lead at Grey Matter, and I'd like to thank you all for registering today for our Building a Fortress 7 Layers of Cybersecurity webinar. We're obviously running a full quarter on cybersecurity awareness starting with October. And this webinar goes through some of the more foundational pieces, but there's some interesting bits at the start of the webinar to try and keep your minds thinking and give you some interesting facts as well. Q&A box is live if you're joining via web browser, so feel free to pop any questions in there. We will do our very best to answer anything that you've got at the end. But keen to get started and tell you all about history of cybersecurity to start off with. Interestingly enough, we can actually track all the technology or the first digital computer back to 1943, and only small groups of people had access to these enormous electronic machines that were available. They weren't even networked, and only a few people knew what they could do. And the threat of cybercrime as it is now was effectively non-existent. And there was a computer engineer, computer pioneer called John von Neumann who first raised the possibility of computer programs that could reproduce themselves in 1949. And that became the underpinning theory to computer viruses was first made public. Notable references, of course, back to that era and the Second World War, 1932, two Polish cryptologists, Marjan Rajewski and Henry Zalaski, broke the Enigma code, and then obviously followed up by 1939 by Alan Turing, Gordon Welchman, and Harold Keen at Bletchley Park, the part of the code breaking at the Enigma machine. When we move into the 1950s, we've still not got anything of a massive element of cybercrime. And computer information gathering wasn't the original purpose of hacking. It's actually more accurate to say that the early telephone use is where hacking originated. What they did was actually tamper with protocols that permitted experts in telecoms to operate on the network remotely, and it was just to make free calls and avoid doing things like paying for long distance or international calls. And that practice gradually disappeared in the 1980s, but these phone freaks were unable to be stopped by the telecoms provider. And again, there's great example of a person called Joey Bubbles Negresa. He was actually a blind 7-year-old boy. He had perfect pitch hearing and discovered that the fourth E above middle C, which is a frequency of 2,600 hertz to be exact, would actually interfere with AT&T's automated telephone systems, and it would inadvertently open the door for that practice. We move into the 1960s, and even moving 40 years on, 30 years on from 1940s, 1930s, most computers were still massive mainframes that were kept in temperature controlled environments that were very safe, access was very restricted, and remained so for programmers. And it was just due to the expanse, and they were massive devices as well. Lot of hacking, if you want to call it that, was actually committed by university individuals, but it wasn't seen as malicious. It was actually a challenge for them, and they were invited by companies like IBM to come in and effectively break the system for any fresh new computer systems that they created. Students were given the training, and they were obviously asked, well, gain entry, see how far you can go about the system weaknesses. And we certainly can see that now as being the first idea of defensive computer measures or even ethical hacking pen testing. And it was the first ever reference to malicious hacking is in an MIT student newspaper. And they, again, some of them were invited, but then misused this again to try and make some more free phone calls because again, that was still a practice or still slightly going on at that time. We move on to the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. We've got the fantastic Bill Gates there in the middle. We'll talk about his fetching sweater taste in a moment. But the 1970s saw the actual start and the need of cybersecurity. It was a very important decade for the evolution of that industry, and ARPANET, or the Advanced Research Project Agency Network, was the initial endeavor and the first network computers created, and it was well before the internet. There was a well-known engineer who actually created the program. His name was Bob Thomas. What it did was effectively go around the different computers and it switched from one machine to another through the network. Completely harmless experiment, and all it really did was actually pop up on people's screens and say, "I'm the creeper. Catch me if you can." We can presume that this is a first example of something like a computer worm or a malware recorded in history. But then you see the first foundations of trying to catch that and fight it because there's another engineer who was also an ARPANET researcher who created the first networked mail messaging system and then created a program that was called Reaper that used every tool at disposal to actually identify where that creeper was connecting to and then eliminate it or stop it from communicating to other terminals. We're seeing the first integration of first, again, defensive measures around cybersecurity. The 80s, yes, it's really when the internet started to take off. We had a massive growth and development for that whole decade. The cybersecurity sector definitely expanded. We look at the first security vendors at that time. So one to note is G Data Software. It was founded by two security experts, Andreas Unig and Kai Fiege, with the company launching an antivirus solution on the Atari ST platform, very old machine these days, probably worth some money if you've got one up in the attic somewhere. And then, of course, McAfee followed with the creation of Virus Scan around 1985, 1986. Again, cybercrime, not a massive thing on the computers. It was just emerging as an industry. Again, the first example of, let's say, intrusive access to a computer system in this country were two gentlemen called Robert Schifrin and Stephen Gold. They were convicted of accessing a telecom gold account, which belonged to the Duke of Edinburgh. And it was the first conviction, or what they tried, or the first conviction they tried them all was for illegally accessing a computer system, what we now know as the Computer Misuse Act. But the conviction for that was actually overturned because, again, it wasn't such a big thing. So they were actually convicted under Forgery and Counterfeiting Act 1981. So even then, we're still not really classifying computer crime as cybercrime. They're completely looking at other areas to try and pin the criminals down. The 2000s, internet continued to grow. It was an amazing time. I know during sort of those years, I was definitely at school and using things like MSN Messenger, MSN chat rooms. Started my internet gaming or my multiplayer gaming career in 1998 and all back to the more simpler times. More businesses and homes had computers. There's loads of benefits, but it meant new opportunities for cyber criminals as well. And it was the first time we saw a brand new infection type that didn't require a file download. It just, if you just went to a website with a virus on it, was enough to infect the machine. And it was a very covert way, and it was proving a very serious threat. Talked about MSN and instant messaging systems, others like Yahoo and AIM, AOL Instant Messenger. They were very compromised a number of times, but the prominent thing back then was credit card hacks. They definitely increased in the 2000s, and there were lots of additional assaults during that time, 2013, 2014. In one incident, hackers gained access to Yahoo accounts of over 3 billion users, which is a significant number. But we consider the last 10 years and we look at the big oops moments. And the first on the top of this list is the Experian data breach 2015, compromised 15 million accounts. The WikiLeaks and Democratic National Committee leak in the US, political cybercrime, the first ever, say, widely documented cybercrime version, and the introduction of the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, and the fines and everything that better structure and better, I'd say, policing or responsibilities for companies who handle data in the European Union. We had the Equifax breach, 150 million customer records, the Uber breach, 57 million, and of course, WannaCry, which was a global issue of ransomware in the UK, definitely hit the NHS. Interesting fact about WannaCry, there's a chap called Marcus Hutchins. He's well worth a follow on LinkedIn, both black hat / white hat hacker. I think he actually works for Hack the Box now. He actually found a way of disabling that ransomware and actually not having to pay the criminals. Helped the US, the UK government. Unfortunately, the US paid him back rather poorly because when he visited that country for a conference, they decided to arrest him on computer hacking charges. So, whilst these white hats do the right thing, they do sometimes pay for their black hat activities as well. In 2018, we have 92 million records from a MyHeritage website. The Marriott hotels had an undetected cyber attack that went almost 5 or 6 years without them knowing they'd been attacked and data had been breached. 2020, a massive change for the world, more people working from home. The world was locked down, and cyber criminals definitely took advantage of this. A lot more QR code attacks, smishing attacks, taking advantage of people by socially engineering them, taking out fake bounce back loans. There's lots of incidents. 2021, and even still to this day, ransomware and supply chain attacks became very prominent. 2022, we had the Ukraine invasion, hacks on News Corp. Microsoft had some issues along with Red Cross. 2023, massive breaches for Activision, ChatGPT, Move It with the Ipswich payment system that integrated and became had a vulnerability exploited a 0-day. UK Electoral Commission, and also a website called 23andMe. The 23andMe, if people aren't aware, is one of these websites where you can send your DNA off, and it'll tell you about what future illnesses or you might have. And hackers gained access to millions of bits of data that were linked to their customers' health profiles. Now, it's one thing to go after people's personal data or financial details, but medical and DNA profiles is certainly quite a scary proposition. You're wondering what they can do with that. They've just been, I think, over the last 3 months, they've actually received their final fines from the GDPR ICO to bring them to heel for that one, which was quite significant. 2024, we had the more of all breaches, loads of different websites such as Spotify, Netflix, a list of thousands where 60 million data records were leaked. And also in February of last year, I'm going to talk about this more on the next couple of slides, deepfake was used on a Hong Kong bank. Someone impersonated their financial director and basically got someone to give away $25 million to transfer it to them by using deepfake video and audio as well. So AI, we'll go more into that shortly. And then we've continued to have supply chain attacks on the multiple NHS Staffordshire Water with a ransomware attack, and attacks on things like regional rail operators. So infrastructure, supply chain, those still remain very prominent and in the sights of cyber criminals. And we can see here a general picture of things that have happened over the last 10 years. Marks and Spencer's this year. Data thefts for Glasgow City Council, they're still ongoing. They're still recovering from that. Massive brands like Adidas. Hackney Council still saying they're addressing a 2020 cyber attack, which was earlier on this year. And a council boss stating that nobody is safe. And of course, in the last few weeks, we have also seen a brand new landmark in the Jaguar Land Rover case where 5,000 different supply chain businesses say that they've been affected by what went on and what happened with the ransomware attack that affected them. It's estimated to have cost nearly £2 billion, which is also taxpayers have had to fund that from the government. So there's a slide shortly that explains their position on it as well. We have a shifting landscape, and that's definitely, this came out from the National Cybersecurity Council 2025 report, that there's been a 50% rise in significant, highly sophisticated attacks using things like deepfakes or social engineering. 204 of those have been nationally significant. So they've had a problem, or they've caused issues on national infrastructure or water, power, rail, whatever it might be. And 48% of all incidents were also nationally significant. And this is only growing in terms of the threat landscape and moving forward and looking at everything that is going to be a factor in what is a constantly evolving landscape. Those emerging threats, so many to talk about: AI, zero day. There's so much out there. Cyber insurance is becoming a lot more of a question for C-level executives to undertake to protect their businesses. But unfortunately, it remains a very unregulated industry. There's still lots of pitfalls, little almost add-ons. So we will cover you for these things, but we won't cover you for things like intellectual property loss. And there's now a lot of them charging extra for if you want ransomware protection. So there needs to be, for me, a change in that attitude and how that's regulated. And of course, ransomware as a service. You've got these cyber criminal groups now like Scatter Spider and others that are around, very prominent, that are creating ransomware as a service product where they will sell something almost like it's a commercial business. Like, I know we've got some ISVs out there looking at the chat. They're creating these programs and actually treating this as their 9 to 5 job. They have marketing departments. They actively go out on Twitter and advertise it. Having seen some examples of these, someone can download this bit of software, click a few buttons like you're making a PowerPoint document like this, and then send it out and let it do its thing. They don't always get it right, though. There is a great example of a failure from a cyber criminal group in Russia. They were sending out ransomware and extorting people for Bitcoin, and they were buying ill-gotten gains with these Bitcoins, such as very nice sports cars, posting videos online of them doing donuts in the street, buying Apple phones, everything you could think of. Now, they based in Russia in a building that you would have significant similarities to something like Canary Wharf or the Gherkin in London. It's that kind of office. But the Russian police did not arrest them for cybercrime. They actually arrested them for not paying the taxes on the goods that they imported. So they think they're clever and they think they can get away with everything. Russia is probably a bad example here of doing the wrong thing. But shows that at least some police forces are trying to go after them even if they can't detect cybercrime. AI, I'm not going to labor this point too much because I could be here for another 45 minutes doing a Q&A about AI and the risks that are going on. The main things to think about right now are data governance and any compliance schemes that are now starting to refer to AI usage. And I think there's going to be a lot more change in the industry around AI use and things like ISO 2701, DORA, all the data compliance regulations that are out there. But AI is definitely a risk. We've not seen any active data breaches or attacks with it. I was shown an example last week at MSP Global by one of our vendors, Acronis, about tools that could be downloaded to deploy malware or created using AI, but they're very clandestine tools. We are seeing direct examples of AI created phishing campaigns and social engineering campaigns, and that's the risk. But we are starting to see vendors that are actually trying to combat this. So there was a vendor that I saw at UK Cyber did a presentation that actually do deep fake detection. So they look at facial, the temperature of your face, and actually the timbre of your voice and tonality, detect whether someone's trying to win you over on a call. Um, More on AI next year. I'm planning to do a whole lot more on it, and we've got something coming up in the first half of the year for that. So keep an eye out. We're going to try and do some more information and give you some skills to defend yourself on good practice. Cyber complexity. We talk about the skills gap right now, and if you're in IT or if you're an IT head, an IT manager, you will know that experienced people who've been in the industry a long time is shrinking. That also counts for cyber security skills as well. And that's related to the expected wage now that a experienced cyber security analyst will have, whether they do EDR for you or they create you a SOC or something similar. There's a skills gap that needs to be addressed, certainly in the UK, by the UK government to start incentivizing students to look at computing or coming into coding or whatever it might be. There needs to be more integration between all of the security vendors in order to stay in front of the ever evolving cyber threats that are out there in the evolving landscape. We're seeing it more and more. Certainly, again, an example of a vendor, two vendors that do that very well on our side are Acronis and Sophos, actually integrating with other products, other well-known products to provide their detection services too. And of course, the ever-growing list of frameworks, which again cover on the next slide, and some of those, they just keep getting more complicated and more added. Of course, digital transformation. We're still running in a world where cloud hybrid IT, where you have people working from home, people working in an office, is increasing. We sometimes see more now actually closing offices altogether and being fully remote, which again, easy to manage, but can be more of a challenge. Means new vulnerabilities, and we've got a great webinar coming up in the next couple of weeks with Olatan, who's our M365 expert, talking about the zero trust capabilities and positive reasons of why you should look at adopting it. My feeling, and I've made some predictions in the past around changes to cyber essentials, which were correct. My prediction is that certain industries may have to look at zero trust as an absolute in the next 2 or 3 years based on the acceleration that we have around AI and other risk areas. Trying not to scare you too much, but that's a feeling. We'll see how we go. Speaking of the frameworks, here's just a short list of what's out there. We have the Cyber Essentials scheme, because for those in the UK on the call, it's a UK government-backed certification scheme, and it looks at 5 key technical controls to protect your organizations against any common cyber threats. Main areas that they look at are firewalls, secure configuration, user access control, malware protection, and patch management. There are little subsections amongst all of them, and they have a standard and a plus version, which is an audited version of that. Further down the list, okay, yep, we've got cyber insurance. I think that needs a framework. NIS2, which is just being copied in the UK with the one at the bottom, or parroted, should we say, by the Cybersecurity Resiliency Bill, certainly holding to account anyone who's in the supply chain or is an MSP, and sticking to a stricter framework and, let's say, reporting incidents as well. We have the NIST certification in America or the US, that is very similar to Cyber Essentials, not quite the same. It's a voluntary framework for managing cybersecurity risk, and again, it's managed around 5 core functions: identify, understanding your organization's risks, knowing what assets you've got, what vulnerabilities, what needs protection; protect, that's safeguarding critical services so they can continue operating, data, protective technology, training and awareness programs, human layer, maintenance procedures, detecting incidents when they occur, continuous monitoring, detection, anomaly identification system, how you respond to a cybersecurity incident. That's response planning, comms, analysis of what's gone on, any mitigation efforts, and recover, focusing on restoring any capabilities and services. This is a very interesting one because I've always said there are bits in there that mirror what we do with the Cyber Essentials standard scheme, but it's almost a mix of the two. But certainly, if you ever want to know more about that, we've got people that can specialize in the NIST framework. If you get asked by someone to, oh, well, you need to apply to these regulations, then we can assist. Just get in contact with us. An interesting message from Richard Horn, who's the current CEO of the National Cybersecurity Council. Time to act is now. Every leader, whether you're one person at a kitchen table or a boss of thousands of people, you must have a plan to defend against cyber criminal attacks. Cybersecurity is a risk to be managed by the whole organization, led by the board, and not just delegated to technical experts. So they're talking about a more holistic effort, a more team effort to stay ahead of cyber criminals. National Cybersecurity website is a great place to go and actually get resources. They have free tools on there that can help you actually, if you're a small business, just get a read of where you are and simple measures you can take. And actually, the small business kit that they've got in there is also targeted towards home users as well. As much as protecting your family, your business, I think there's also some cases now where you have to protect and prepare your family about those issues as well. And they've got some great advice on there because it is a government-based organisation. Another consideration we've got is when we think about the areas of cybersecurity now, there are no less than 70 different categories out there. And what we've tried to get to the point of with the 7 layers of cybersecurity is the foundational elements of it. Because some of the things on here are nice to have and nice to have as an enhancement to what you've got. But for me, I think unless you're doing the foundational things right, then there's no point in looking at things like dark web monitoring or identity theft detection. Foundational first, and then look at the advanced capabilities that you want to have as a business and where you want to make your investments as well. And so I say 7 layers of cybersecurity. Very easy to identify those. We start from the most crucial layer, which is human. Perimeter next, network security, endpoint, application, which is patching and vulnerability management, data security, and the mission critical assets as well. And what we're going to do is have a little delve into each one of these sections, give you an idea of what some best practice might be, along with some statistics as well, can't get my words out, as to why they're important to businesses or why you should be thinking about them. Starting off, of course, with the squidgy bit between the chair and the keyboard, or ID10 errors, I've heard it say before. 88% of cybersecurity breaches are caused by human error, and at least 68% involved a human element in 2024, and that is across phishing, that is across social engineering campaigns, and is only increasing. The ultimate tip is build a human firewall as your first line of defense. Phishing simulations, which a lot of our solutions that we provide can do, they reduce the click rate of business email compromise by 60-70%. It doesn't have to be a time-consuming exercise to deploy, or it doesn't have to be expensive. There's lots of choice out there, and we can definitely help advise you best pace forward and also help you implement and deploy some of these tools as well. If you're a small business or you're a big business, then you find you don't have a lot of time. Final thing is it can reduce your cybersecurity insurance premiums as well. So if you're actually thinking, yeah, I want to go for a cybersecurity insurance premium or get liability cover, this is one of the many layers. In fact, all of these layers will actually help you reduce your cost of that as well. Show you something very interesting, a bit of an experiment that we did at our tech summit, where I think some of the people in the chat saw this live and in person. We did we dropped some QR codes around, and it was a bit of a red herring, and unfortunately we did manage to get 17 people to scan the QR code. Now, as you can see there, we have a completely fake Lego model that was generated through, I think, Sora or a different AI engine. Now, I'm a massive Lego fan and a massive Dune fan as well. So those of you know, this is the Dune from Sandworm. And honestly, if that was a real model, I'd actually be convinced that I'd want to enter this competition as well. But there are little things that we put on this that just showed that people weren't quite paying attention. So we have at the top, the grey matter logo is completely incorrect. It's very squashed. It's the wrong colours. We fake generated the prize. Just because a website says it's secure doesn't mean it's secure. So having a secure, it's encrypted by 256 logo on there doesn't mean it is. And of course, we all know to look for the HTTPS prefix now when we're going to a secure website. It was the wrong address. For any of the, and I'm 39 now, so I apologise for using the word any older people out there. 29 Acacia Road, London, N22 5SB, which for the older people will know that that was the address of Eric from Banana Man. And we also support some fake terms and conditions at the bottom. So some very silly, again, I used AI to suggest some of these jokey lines to me. We had the winner cannot be contacted, assume they've been abducted by aliens and move on. Can't contact you within 2 days. You'll be forced to do a video of a victory dance or the prize hostage until the phone is answered by the winner. No purchase necessary, but investment encouraged. Void where prohibited, which is probably anywhere, and side effects may include uncontrollable optimism and runner's remorse. Now, I say all this, and this was a social experiment, but realistically, I feel there needs to be a lot more consideration for the human element of businesses. There's an example recently that I read where a company was threatening a gentleman who'd only been there 2 weeks with dismissal from his job or cancelling his probation because he'd actually been fished every day in his first week. And from what it was reported, the emails were almost too convincing. They were coming from exactly the same addresses as their HR department and other bits. So the compassion and actually, what I said about that cultural piece becomes a lot more critical. We need to reduce the cognitive overload. So cognitive behaviors need to be biased with using more inclusivity and considered strategies around cybersecurity awareness training, and teach at every step. Everything. I heard something once by a software engineer that always assume you're under attack, and I think that's the same thing when you're thinking about that human firewall. You need to be teaching everyone at every step and teaching consistently and proactively in order to create that human firewall. Again, on these behavioral bits, we've got a very interesting webinar coming up in the next couple of weeks with a lady called Annette from CyberSmart, who is a cyber psychologist. Really would suggest getting on that one as well because it's going to be very interesting. She's a PhD. She's a very intelligent lady, and her talking about this in a much more professional way than I can. Moving away from the human layer to perimeter, there are definite benefits to having a strong perimeter security. You use a remote systems and access control. You maintain passive policy and hygiene. And again, through those certain schemes that we looked at and others that you might subscribe to, is now become regulatory compliance. Some statistics around perimeter security. There's been a massive adoption of M365 as their primary productivity platform, 84%. But only 37 have actually implemented comprehensive security controls beyond the defaults that you get, and identify identity-based attacks increased by 156% last year, and 68% of breaches occurred due to a very weak perimeter control. In terms of user governance, because we're now moving away from calling this password management, surprisingly, 65% of people reuse passwords across multiple accounts. Actually, should I say unsurprisingly? We've got so many systems that we need to log in now, we're going to keep reusing it. And then 81% actually have breaches involved weak or stolen passwords. Perimeter becomes a bigger conversation, especially if you're going for things like Cyber Essentials Plus. And M365 can be leveraged in such a way now, and the business premium suite is a great foundational point to move if you're on something like business standard. Again, we can help you access those tools in the most productive way and the most cost-effective way as well. Plus, other solutions we have around identity access management, such as Keeper, 1Password, and a few others as well. Moving on to network security. So there, again, needs to be kind of a shift change from what we used to refer to as standard firewalls. The benefits of having a firewall, you've got network security protection, you've got protection against AL attacks, and you can control your access and the traffic management into your cloud servers or even on premise if you're not cloud centric. The challenges around standard firewalls are a lot of them still rely on just a simple port-based firewall, just doing the network traffic management. 40% use firewalls that are actually older than 5 years. Trends on that are that 70% of security breaches bypass traditional perimeter defenses, and 83% of successful attacks use encrypted traffic. They will actually act like their friendly traffic. They will disguise their IPs. They'll go through a port number that you use from an RDS system and remain undetected. That's where they changed to next-gen firewalls and considered change away if you've had a Draytech box that's sat there for a few years. They now have intrusion prevention systems and integrate with a lot of other products as well. They do advanced threat protection with sandboxing. So if an application is behaving in a weird way, i.e. it suddenly started communicating to a server where it's never connected before in somewhere like North Korea as an example, it'll look at that traffic and immediately start to automate warnings or even automate responses around that as well. And of course, SSL decryption to stop that obfuscated connections that we were talking about a moment ago. Benefits, moving from your standard to your next gen, 95% threat detection versus 45, a 60% reduction in any false positives, i.e. going and looking at stuff that is normal or just behaving in a slightly weird way. And then automated response capabilities, taking pressure off you as an IT team and automating and getting ahead, again, staying ahead of any of the attackers that try to break through your firewalls, be it DDoS or many other methods. Endpoint security. Now, this is a very interesting section, and we talk about protecting your workstation, servers, and mobile devices. It's basically any devices that you use across your business should be considered, and they're still, as well as phishing, it's still one of the biggest entry points. But the question we get consistently asked is, well, what is the right level for me? Because there are so many different abbreviations now, EDR, XDR, Managed Detection Response, or SOC, or Security Operations Center. I'm hoping that this table, feel free to take a snip if you want to right now of that one, may give you a basic idea of what to be. Now, I'm going to say this is just a guide because if you're in a certain industry, such as working with the MOD or working with local government, a lot of them are now saying you have to have EDR capabilities in order to fulfill contracts. There are some businesses out there and other sectors that will say, well, no, you need to be Cyber Essentials certified or something similar. So use this as a guide, but ultimately, if you feel like you need more guidance, this is where we say come talk to us because we can definitely help. Traditional AV doesn't require many security staff at all, just one person to go and deploy and respond to anything that happens in terms of incidents. The response time is very much manual, and it's where you have limited threat exposure as a business. It might be a compliance checkbox requirements, and you don't need a dedicated security resource. Where you move to NDR is if you have a security team available that's going to be able to look at that dashboard at least between 9 and 5. But in the best case scenario, you've got to, if you want to have the best and stay in front, then 24/7 monitoring required. But that costs money, and you need 3 or 4 people, 2 to 5 analysts to look at all the data, do all the remediation. It might be that you've got those regulatory requirements for monitoring, but also that budget for the technology staff and training that you need to constantly be providing to maintain that good standard. This is where managed detection and response becomes a little bit more appropriate because it will cost less to enable services from another vendor or one of the many AV vendors that offer this, who will give you 24/7 monitoring, and it will limit your need for internal security expertise. Very good for high value target organizations, finance, education, lots fit into that list right now, or healthcare, and also very good for compliance with any strict frameworks as well. Ultimately, the top two, EDR and XDR, when we go back to that cybersecurity insurance bit, will help you reduce your premiums. If you say we've got 24/7 monitoring, oh great, that knocks another 5k off your bill or whatever it is for your yearly cost. Again, finding the right one. We've got some resource on this. Come and talk to us. We can help you, guide you to the best solution and the best vendor as well, because there is a choice. Moving to application security, patching and vulnerability management. It's there to protect sensitive data from attack. 0 days are still very prominent out there, and having an active patch and vulnerability management process will help you remediate any gaps in security before you're exposed. Some of them actually now require you to test regularly for compliance reasons, and you'll get strength via a more proactive approach to this. There are, however, some pitfalls. All right, skipped ahead too far, too much clicking. At a small business, often what we hear and see is that there's an over-engineering beyond what's capable. So things like WSUS is a great example. They're using that for patching, but that's a very manual system. Someone will ignore third-party applications, things you use day to day, like Adobe Acrobat or something similar, or a bit of development software that you download for free. Often you have a lack of rollback plans as well. So if you do go and deploy the latest Windows feature update, we've all been there. I know I have as a PC gamer, where you install a Windows update and all of a sudden you try to restart your machine and it says, oh, sorry, I've got to do a system repair, or you have to format the system altogether. So it's about not just obviously monitoring the patching and monitoring the vulnerabilities, but also thinking about worst case scenario if one of these goes wrong, or monitoring something more severe. Medium business pitfalls. Because you see in the medium, you're either doing one of two things. You're either staying static with your staff count, or you're actually increasing your staff members due to growth. And oftentimes it will mean that they're underestimating that scaling change. It means inefficient change management. So you keep using the same tools and not actually monitoring or managing what software tools users have, or who can do what as well, who can go and install the applications, control a bit, ultimately leading to inadequate staff training as well. And that's not just the human layer thing, that's inadequate staff training on what they can or what they should or shouldn't be doing when it comes to application use or third-party cloud use, for instance. Your large enterprise pitfalls, because you tend to see large enterprises using a lot of different tools and that lack of integration I talked about, it can be a problem because you might be having to go to 3 or 4 different places. It means a lack of standardization across different divisions, because your HR department might use more software than your warehouse employee who's shipping you stuff on a daily basis. You might only use email. So there needs to be good planning, but also it is very time intensive if you're managing vulnerabilities every day and you're looking at patching and trying to stay ahead of the game, and insufficient automation in the solutions that you use, which can definitely help be more proactive and allow you to go and do the things that you want to do. Again, we can advise on all of these in any size of business and get you the right solution that will fit your requirement. So again, look at the website. We've got lots of stuff on there, but of course, get in touch with us if you want to discuss it further. Data security, and a lot of these are obviously key parts of the cyber essentials scheme. I haven't said that, so we've tried to match these as best we can against those regulatory requirements and frameworks. Data security or data loss prevention or encrypting your data. It enhances your data visibility, where it's gone, who's got hold of it, what's happened with it, where has that been downloaded to. There's a financial risk mitigation with there because the cost of a data breach and actually picking something up early if someone does something inappropriate with it. It can reduce your data breach, the impact of the data breach, and all of that ultimately. Avoiding this will avoid any business reputation damage if you did have, or you had to go and report a data breach to the ICO, had to make that public knowledge. Some basic steps to data security or data loss prevention. Your first stage is always look at doing a data discovery assessment. Look at where any data, sensitive data resides, especially anything that is PII or personally identifiable information. First priority is monitoring email communications and anybody trying to attach anything or share something that they shouldn't do. Insider threats are just as bad as someone from the outside trying to gain access to your data. A malicious employee who might be trying to sell trade secrets or something similar becomes as big of a risk as it does from someone from the outside trying to break in. Second priority, we have more people working from mobile devices, tablets, and surfaces. So it should be your second in terms of monitoring who does what, where does that data go, who has got access to it as well. And then your third priority is your physical devices, your workstations, and your servers to monitor any of those file transfers. Encryption can be your ultimate safety net, and there's again solutions out there that can encrypt data both in transit or even as they're going into a server. Again, we are seeing certain frameworks or mention on certain frameworks of them making this an absolute if you're storing PII data. Needs to be clearer guidance on this, but there are tools out there and ways to do that. And much like the human layer where we talk about incident response, have an incident response process if you're using very sensitive data. Have it ready to go to break the glass in case of emergency, so everybody knows what they're doing, who's doing what, who needs to be notified, who the stakeholders are, and plan effectively. I realized I was talking for all of that and I actually didn't press my second animation. I'm really sorry about that. Feel free to scream. I was saying all of that, just going through that list without doing it. Excuse me. And we come to the final layer of the cake, as my boss likes to call it, 7-layer security cake. Backup and disaster recovery. Same things as data protection. It minimizes downtime. It's data protection. It retains customer trust. And again, there are regulations like ISO 27001 that have a regulatory compliance around data retention and how you back it up. To quote the great Benjamin Franklin, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. One of the best approaches that you can have around backup or a better strategy around it, we used to always say 3, 2, 1 as a rule. So it was 3 different copies of data on 2 different types of media, and 1 off-site copy if you can. That avoids any kind of problems if you were to have a breach or natural disaster, i.e. server room catches fire or the hardware goes wrong. It means you get back off your feet. We add further stages into this by saying having an offline copy or something that's completely untouchable or immutable backup so that it has no change. So if you were to bring that back in, let's say you suffered a ransomware attack and someone deleted all the data, you've got no errors when you get your systems back online. Again, disaster recovery orchestration and actually having a plan of action, having something that might automate spinning a server back up for you if it's a critical system, becomes very important. So much like the data loss prevention and the incident response, have a disaster recovery plan drawn up and ready to go, smash the glass when something does happen. Something else that constantly gets overlooked is M365 disaster backup and disaster recovery. 65% of organizations don't have a comprehensive M365 backup. 40% have actually experienced significant data loss. The average recovery time is 7 to 10 days. And it can now be a compliance gap, and it's found in a survey to affect over 70% of organizations. The common misconceptions is that Microsoft will handle all the backups. That's not necessarily true. It is a shared responsibility model. Microsoft will protect the infrastructure, but they leave it down to the customer to back up anything outside of their data retention policy, which is limited, 30 to 90 days typically. So if you're, again, healthcare is a great example of this. You need to keep data for a long time or need to have something to refer back to for any reason. It's where third-party backup tools make more sense. Because permanent deletion scenarios are not covered by them. The user error recovery, if it is your responsibility. Benefits, of course, are it will automate daily backups, get you long-term retention of years, not days, and you get many granular recovery options as well. You can actually go and search for things. Permanent deletion scenarios are not covered. Sorry, I'm repeating myself here. Let me delete that line and continue. More beneficial now with some of these third-party solutions is that you can replicate your Entra environment as well. Entra, you can definitely refer to it as almost being the keys to the kingdom for a lot of businesses now. And things like MFA, the configuration, conditional access policies. Let's say someone did breach with a password, someone got hold of the admin password and they lock you out. And they delete everything, they delete all your config. Having Entra and just pushing a button to get that back up and running while you can re-secure everything allows you to go investigate what's gone on. Can be very valuable. But again, lots of different choices on our vendor portfolio. We're happy to guide you and get you the one that either meets the cost you're looking for or does the most in terms of if you are working to a framework or you've been mandated to have backup on your 365. So we go back to the 7 layers. What we want you to think about is elevating your security. And with that point, I'd like to introduce the 7-layer security assessment. We offer this as a completely free assessment for you. It's been created using the Cyber Essentials and Cyber Assessment Framework guidelines and standards that were set by the NCSC. What it's about is us helping you identify and understand any potential gaps in your cybersecurity strategy. And you get a report out of the back of this, which is measured in a cybersecurity maturity score and a recommended timeline of steps to help you build to a higher level or meet any aspirations you've got. I think I said at the start, this is a completely free assessment. So if you want to book one of those, we have more resource at greymatter.com on the cybersecurity solutions page. Or if you're an account managed customer, please speak to your account manager and they can help you book me and find my availability to get you booked onto one of those calls so we can help you improve and add any of those layers or strengthen any of the weak ones that you feel you might have. To finish off with another quote, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, fantastic book. I am a military history nerd. I'm not afraid to admit that. Know your enemy, know yourself, and you can fight 100 battles without disaster. And I think that's very prominent in some of the messaging that I've talked about today. It's knowing your business, but also knowing from a point of view of what the cyber criminals are doing, keeping an eye on the front line and reacting to that in the quickest way possible becomes very key. There is a lot of change, as I say, around AI and lots of other emerging threats that are coming out there. And we will do our best to do much more content or as much content as we can to help keep you informed. And of course, as I've said throughout this, reach out to us for guidance because if we don't know the answers, we've got so many security vendors that we can work with, professional level engineers that can come in and talk to you about your requirements or any concerns that you've got. So don't be afraid to send the emails in or obviously uh, reach us via Microsoft Teams. If you use that, you can reach us by directly by our email addresses these days, I believe, as well. I'd like to thank you all again for attending the webinar today. I really appreciate your attendance. Again, to mention some of the, I've already mentioned a couple of the webinars that we've got coming up with Ola from our 365 team and our CyberSmart. We're releasing episodes throughout, or we have released a couple of episodes so far as part of our Grey Matter Talks Tech podcast, covering all 7 layers of cybersecurity in a little bit more detail than I have done today, and a few more bits of content to come out from some of the great vendors that we work with, such as Sophos and Know-Before, due to come in the future as well. Again, if you've got anything, you can contact myself at that email address or contact numbers. You know your account managers if you're out there and they've got you registered for the webinar. Again, I really appreciate your attendance. Have a great Wednesday. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll speak to you very, very soon.